Hello, my lovely witches and warlocks, practitioners of magic, and just wonderful people out there. Today, I'm going to talk about the Witch's Circle. Something I don't really use, but kind of use sometimes. The traditional Witch's Circle is something that especially became popular when Wicca sort of emerged and it became sort of this structured religion. It is very much like a ceremony for any particular working that you're doing. If you're in a coven, a lot of times when the coven gathers, they will do a witch's circle and perform whatever it is they're going to perform that day, whether it's just for spellcraft, meditation, sometimes just protection, or if they're doing witches' sabbats or some sort of worship, spirit circle, or just for no reason at all. Sometimes it's just a good practice to do a witch's circle. So, what it is you create a sacred space, and within that sacred space, you follow a kind of a process where, well, first cleanse and purify the space, cleanse and purify yourself, which can be, for me, I usually just hop in the shower. And in the shower, I do what I sort of like a psychic cleanse, where I just sort of state my intention that let this water purify me and cleanse me of all negativity. And then what you can do after that is get into your attire, your witch's outfit, right? Whether it's robes, whether it's your hat, because even that is sort of a symbolic kind of cleansing. It's like a snake and you're shedding your skin, right? You're getting into that magical mindset. Then you cast your circle. Casting the circle can vary depending. Some people will sort of point their finger, and you'll find disagreement a lot about how to do it, whether you go clockwise, counterclockwise. Some visualize it, some say a chant. Like one Hecatean way I do it is first grounding with Ascendat Serpens, Descendat Columba, and then Jairam Carpo, seize the circle. You can say other things like Away the Profane, where you're basically just blocking out negativity, right? And this sacred space is a container for your energy, your magical energy, and keeping out negative energy that might sabotage your spellcraft. You can also use a wand. I have a staff, right? You just draw a circle. Some people will do it on the ground, like they'll make a literal circle. If you've looked at ceremonial magic, like the Keys of Solomon, they legit drew a big circle with all the names of God and angels and all that stuff. I don't do that. Typically, how I do it is I use energy work. I sort of craft a bit of an orb. With the intention of creating a sacred space, and I expand it, and I'm in a bubble, right? That's how I do it. Then we get to calling the quarters, which usually is the elemental guardians like earth, air, fire, water, and and sort of saying, okay, you stand at north, you stand at west, east, all those things. I typically don't do that because there's something kind of, for me, arrogant about it, like calling on a higher spiritual being and then say, okay, now you stand there. That's just, I don't do that. I mean, I do invite elemental energy in with my own sort of incantation, but I don't tell them where to go. They know better than me how to help, so I let them do it on their own. Same with like the invoking ritual of the pentagram, where you're using angels and again assigning them to specific directions. I find directions are arbitrary, and you'll notice that in different schools of thought, some may say, well, this one should be at east and this one should be at south, because I was taught that this one goes here and that one goes there. it's arbitrary, and directions, if you're thinking about a cosmic spiritual being, what do directions mean to them, right? Like, we only have north because we're on a planet with a magnetic north. Directions are going to be different on another planet, and they're not going to use northwest, east, south if you're in space, and especially considering that a circle is a space beyond space, a time beyond time. You're creating this special little space that sort of links the different worlds and realms. So why are you still using a compass directions? To me, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't mean you can't do that. By all means, do what works for you, especially if you're in a coven or you're practicing a specific tradition, Gardnerian, whatever. Do what works for you. Um, I don't necessarily do that. After calling the quarters, then you sort of invoke deities, whatever deity you're working with, traditionally the goddess and the god, Hecate, although not always called Hecate, or Coronos, whatever that may be. Whatever the intent of your ritual is, you would ask for those deities, right? If today's Thursday where I am, if I was going to do some sort of ritual, an offering to Jupiter, then I would invoke Jupiter, right? A lot of what I do is just going to involve Hecate. Yeah. Let's see. Some will anoint themselves with some sort of like holy water, cleansing oil, or potion to once again purify. Why? Well, the intention is that you've created a sacred space and you're in it, but you're still a person. You can have negative thoughts, you can have doubts, right? And if you're doing a spell, you don't want an unconscious thought in the back of your mind saying, this isn't going to work. I've never done that. I'm a big proponent of shadow work and also consulting spirits before I attempt a spell. So before I attempt a spell, I will do some divination, I will talk to spirit guides, and if it's going to work, it's going to work. If there's a problem with it, they'll tell me. If there's a perspective on it, maybe I haven't seen, they can tell me, or they might even offer like a different method, like, hey, you were gonna burn a candle for this, but have you thought of trying this instead? That might work better for this particular spell. So I'm a big proponent of consulting with spirit guides, consulting with Hecate, rather than doing some sort of purification, because for me, that's validation. So I know it's going to work because they told me. I don't have those doubts going into it. Let's see. So after that, then what do? Some would call it naming the work, or another way of saying it is just state your intention. Okay? If you're in oh, shush. We will play after. I mean, if you're gathered in a specific coven, they might have their own incantation or way of speaking. They might have a particular prayer. Like, I mean, you go to church, we are gathered, like, or a wedding, right? We are gathered here today to join these two. That's naming the work, right? I might do something like this spell. Now I can't think of an example off the top of my head. I don't do a lot of spells anymore. Because one thing you notice when you start practicing this is when you first get into it, you want to do a spell for everything. You want to do like 10 spells a day. Oh, I want to spell for this. I want to spell for that. And then the more you learn about it and the more you learn about the craft, the less you tend to do spells. There's not much need. There's more trust in things that are just going to work out. That being said, I have customers, so that's usually when I'm doing a spell, and even then it's not often. So you would state your intention, then you would raise energy, which can be done in a few ways. If you're in a more traditional Wiccan school of thought, oh, I forgot the Great Rite. Okay, so we'll come back to that, but the Great Rite, where you do some sort of symbolic gesture that symbolizes the union of the goddess and the god, right? You could take your blade, your atham, however you want to pronounce it, athame, athame, your ritual blade, your dagger, whatever, and sort of dip it in your chalice. That's one way of doing it. Where I am now, I left a lot of my tools home, but if you've studied, like, say, from Psychic Witch, or even the Inner Temple of Witchcraft, a lot of schools will say that you can have sort of a psychic version of that, right? So if I was going to do the Great Rite, I would visualize my, oh boy, this is a can of worms. I would visualize the blade I got when I journeyed to the realm of air, which sounds crazy. Maybe I should do a whole video. Maybe this video should have followed a few other videos first, but journey to the realm of air, got this sort of, what we'll call it, imaginary blade with quartz crystal on the pommel, right? And I would visualize that dipping into the silver chalice, boop, right? Some traditions will have the high priestess and the high priest sort of act out the union, whether they're doing some prayers, whether they're physically with a blade and with a chalice, boop, or they'll have sex, which I'm a big proponent of. In fact, I'm going to do a video on sex magic because I do sort of see the magic in sex, depending on how you use it, what your intention is, right? There is raising energy. There is something spiritual about that. It's a very act of creation. So, hey, if you're part of a coven that does that, awesome. No judgment here. I am not a part of a coven. I am the more traditional solitary practitioner, right? So the Great Rite, then raising energy. And again, if you're in that more traditional Wiccan sort of pagan tradition, they might recite the Charge of the Goddess or the Witch's Rune. To me, that's a little too churchy. I usually, raising energy is part of usually when I perform a spell, my favorite method is either with a sigil or even just writing down my spell. I chant it and 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 I build this fever pitch. That's how I'm raising energy. Another chant you can do is one, I am the green, I am, what is it? No, I am the earth, I am the green, I am the light, I am the dream. That's one. I've used that a couple of times. And just sort of chanting that and building that up. You can dance. That's a fun one. I've tried once or twice. I put on some shamanic drumming and done some dancing and just sort of building that energy. Drumming is another one. I partook, not any ceremony that I've led, but ceremonies I've been a part of, which were more First Nations, involved drumming and singing and building the energy that way. Once you've raised that energy, you can perform your work, whatever it is, whether you're speaking with spirits, meditating, you're casting a spell, whatever it may be. For me, like I said, my traditional spell that I do involves both at the same time. Like, I'm chanting my spell, and when I get to that fever pitch, when it's time to release the energy, which we'll talk about the cone of power, when it comes to the point where I want to release that energy, I've built it up and I built it up and I just can't contain it anymore. I would burn the little parchment I have my spell written on, and it burns, put it in my little cauldron, close it, so mote it be, and then you feel a high. That's how you know it worked, is if you get a buzz. If you get like, whoo, like if you've seen some of my videos where I talk to spirits and they cross over, I would get these aftershocks, and it's the same sort of buzz that you get. And for me, that tells me it worked. And then for me personally, like I follow up by checking in with, I used to be just spirit guides, but more often now with Hecate, I check with the spirit board. Hey, did that work? Yes. Scale of 1 to 10. How effective was it? And they gave me a number. Hecate is a much harsher critic than the spirit guides. Like, I might ask the spirit guides, hey, how did I do? And they'll be like, that was a 9 out of 10. That was a great, ceremony ritual you just did. I ask Hecate, yeah, that was a 6. Okay, what could I do better next time? What could I improve on? And usually the answer is going deeper in that altered state of consciousness, which is part of raising the energy. It's getting into that alpha state. What comes after that? Right, the cone of power, which is something that always confused me because I didn't know, like, these witches are standing in a circle. Is the cone coming down over them like this? When they release their energy, they're doing this. Oh, so the cone is coming off of them like that? Is this cone something in the air above them? And I'm picturing them releasing energy and it's swirling up and going into the universe? And the answer is all the above, whatever it is that you visualize is typically the consensus that I get. It's not something I've usually do, depending on the magic I'm doing. Like I said, like it's about releasing the energy, and the terminology of cone of power ties into the more religious doctrine of witchcraft. Like if you're strictly a Wiccan, then you've probably heard the term cone of power. If you're more traditional, or not traditional, if you're more like a solitary practitioner, you might have your own. Like for me, like I said, when I burn that parchment over a candle and I dip it in the cauldron, close it, so mote it be, I feel the release. I've never pictured a cone, but that doesn't mean that sometimes I don't visualize like a ripple effect. Like if you drop a stone in water and it spreads out, typically that's what I'm visualizing, is that ripple effect of it just spreading out throughout the universe from this little tiny planet Earth. After that, whatever final blessing you might want to do, if you're in a gathering of witches, there might be some sort of like, oh, at this time we would offer healing to those, or this or that. Some might write them down. Some might just be a general like blessing, and offer gratitude to the spirits that were present. Then you do things in reverse. You release the quarters. What is it, devocation? You thank the gods for showing up. You say goodbye. You pay your respects to them. And maybe some grounding after that, depending on how you're feeling. I like the buzz. And it's typically, I'm not doing a spell before I have to, go shopping or anything. So I like to sit and stew in that energy a little bit. But, do some grounding, eat a piece of chocolate, drink coffee, put your feet on the earth, feel the energy. Now, do I do the full practice of that? Typically, no. Have I done it a few times? Yes. Why? Because it's great exercise. It is, if you think of witchcraft as an activity, the witch's circle, the whole process is like a full body workout in terms of magical practice. If you want to brush up on any of those skills, it covers all of them, right? It calling in the quarters, the elements, communicating with the divine, casting a spell, all of that, getting in, raising energy, getting into an altered state of consciousness, it does the full, um, runs the full gamut of the skills that you need for witchcraft. But for me, it's a craft, right? Like art. What kind of artist do you want to be? If you're learning guitar, are you doing it because you want to be in a cover band and cover other people's music? Or are you learning guitar because you want to write your own songs? And keep in mind, things like The Charge of the Goddess, somebody wrote that. Someone came up with it. The Witch's Rune, Doreen Valiente, right? If you're Wiccan, that's Gardner, right? You're just covering their songs, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to learn how to play guitar, is by learning your favorite songs. But at some certain point, as an artist, art is about expressing yourself. Are you gonna do your own? Are you gonna create your own, right? So for me, practice it, do it a few times, get a feel for it, learn what it feels like to cast a sacred space, learn what it feels like to invoke the elements and deities, learn what it feels like to raise energy. And once you understand that feeling and you can recognize it, take what you've learned, apply it to your own craft. That's what I say. If you've never cast the Witch's Circle in that traditional sense, I recommend trying it because it's great exercise. You want to become a better witch? You want to get better at this? You want to cast better spells? Do that exercise. Look at it as exercise because it's fantastic. It's high intensity interval training for witchcraft, right? If all you've ever done is the Witch's Circle, if all you've ever done is be part of a specific coven that does these specific rituals, try crafting your own, right? Because it's about growing and learning. If you're just stagnating, if you're just staying the same, if you're just playing the same old music that someone else wrote, you're not really growing as a musician or an artist, right? Do I follow all these steps when I cast a spell? Typically no, because it depends. Because a lot of the times when I get my feedback, the feedback is you should have went deeper, right? So maybe more time in that altered space might increase the effectiveness of my spell, and it usually does. That being said, I have customers. Like, do I really want to make them sit there and wait and sit there awkwardly while I'm doing all of this, while I'm sitting there quietly like, right? It's about taking everything you've learned and trying to craft your own methods. And for me, it's, if I have customers, I want something that's quick and efficient and effective, right? Let's compare it to martial arts. Bruce Lee was a magician. He may not have known it, but if you know anything about witchcraft and then you study Bruce Lee, you're like, oh, yeah, that guy knew what he was doing. And his sort of school of thought is, why would you jump up in the air, twirl around, and do a kick, and hit someone in the face when you can achieve the same result with a quick headbutt? You know, one is very difficult to do. It takes a lot more energy. Very cool to look at, very fancy, but that quick little headbutt, same result, a lot less effort, much more efficient, right? So this is a craft. It's spelled craft. It's about expressing yourself. So take all the knowledge you're learning, practice the Witch's Circle, but ultimately express yourself, right? Come up with your own rituals, your own incantations, your own method of doing spells. Don't just do what I did. Don't just write. If you like the idea of how I do a spell where I write it down and then I chant it over and over and burn it, and you want to try it, okay, go ahead. Do it to see what it feels like. But if that's all you ever do, then you're just covering my songs. That's flattering, but do you want to grow as a witch? What is your intention with witchcraft? Do you just want to copy other witches? Or do you want to explore into new territory and grow? I guess that's my final thought on the Witch's Circle. There's a lot of value in it, but it's not my go-to. I'm not going to do it every single time. If I'm rusty, hey, great way to brush up on those skills. And I guess that's about it. Share my knowledge. I feel like if I'm posting this on YouTube, I'm supposed to say, click like, subscribe, whatever. But if you do have some other witches friends out there, by all means, show them my videos, see what they say. Maybe they disagree. And I invite discussion. Post in the comments, disagree with me if you want. Because if you disagree with me, that'll get me thinking. That might stir some creativity and critical thinking on my end. And maybe I can grow and improve as a witch. Thank you very much. Enjoy yourselves. Blessed be.